Welcome, it's your boy Seth Garu with Maker's Bar, where we're creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. This is a particularly interesting guest to have with me today, and I'm fascinated by what we're going to engage in conversation. So thank you all for joining us today. He is the creator of purpose mapping, Craig Filek. Craig, thank you so much for joining us today with Maker's Bar. We really appreciate you taking out the time with us.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man.
Absolutely. So, Craig, as a man who has hit 40 plus years, I got to say, when I found out who you were and what you were doing, as a man who has experienced a number of different men workshops and Sterling Men, which is one of the ones that was particularly close to my heart, we are pleased to have you here because I think that your particular work is what is needed right now for a conversation. And I'm just excited to get into exactly what it is. But before we do that, what I'd like to be able to do, if you don't mind, Craig, tell us about yourself, where you come from, where you were born, and a little bit about your origins.
Sure. Every hero's got an origin story, right?
That's right. Oh, yeah.
So I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And everything I do is based on the hero's journey. So the hero's journey, for those who don't know, if you think of your favorite movies, Star Wars, The Matrix, Harry Potter, The Wizard of Oz, there's always the origin of the hero. And the hero starts out in the ordinary world. So this is Harry Potter under the stairs. This is Luke Skywalker before he was a Jedi, just living in a hole in the sand on some desert planet. Neo just being a late night computer hacker. And that ordinary world for me was Chicagoland, halfway to Wisconsin, growing up in this idyllic bubble. I was adopted at birth, and my folks were right around 30 or so when they adopted me. And so they were well established, a CPA and an English teacher. And they went on to have phenomenal careers. They won the American dream. I mean, they just hit the jackpot. And so I was kind of like Siddhartha. I never saw pain. I never saw disease. I never saw hunger. I never saw death. I just kind of grew up in this bubble. And, lived on a golf course, had cornfields on one side and, woods on the other. And I just made tree forts and it was really idyllic. It really was. But I was never taught that there was a real world that I was going to have to contend with. And so I ended up going to one of the top high schools in the country. I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, got a philosophy degree, and had no idea that, the whole Maslow's pyramid thing, right? You go up and I'm working on self-actualization and I don't have a handle on survival, safety, social belonging. I was a pretty awkward dude. And then, I kind of fall off the edge of the conveyor belt at 22 years old and self-actualization, eye of the pyramid, face down in a mud puddle. And I had to basically start over with no life skills. Had a daughter a couple years later, unexpectedly, as adoptees often repeat our childhood process. Yeah. And I had to figure it out. I listened to The Millionaire Mind by Thomas J. Stanley, which is PhD level research on, who are the millionaires? Like, how do they think? What do they buy? What do they drive? What types of businesses do they have? What's their work ethic? What are their values? And I remember being, 25, 26 years old and calling my folks and saying, I don't ever want another dime from you. I mean, they weren't sustaining me, but every once in a while they, throw me some money for something. And I just realized I have to figure this out on my own. I have to become a self-sustaining man and father. And, the relationship didn't last, but I just realized that was the type of man I wanted to be. And at the same time, realizing that I am unemployable, that I just cannot have a job. I can't have a boss. I just can't do it. And so that makes me an entrepreneur. And so I had to figure out sales and marketing. And what I realized is this is psychology and math is what marketing is, particularly direct response marketing, the kind of marketing that I was involved in. And I just went down that rabbit hole, and I have tried every single type of business, from MLMs to real estate investing, flipping houses, all types of sales, manufacturing, representative, pretty much anything you can imagine, selling tech, selling services. And I eventually fumbled with the combination lock enough that I started getting some success. And I spent every dime I had. Who was the Greek philosopher that said, with what little money I get, I buy books, and with what's left, I buy food and clothes, right? And so just investing every single thing I could into my growth. And I'm probably pushing 2,000 books at this point, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on coaching, training, therapy, workshops. I've been doing men's work for 30 years. And so this has been my hero's journey, and this ride out of the ordinary world into the adventure of what does it mean to be a man in America in this day and age. And I think that's a point you and I connected on. So I just want to pause there and just say, there's no guidelines, there's no rule book, there's no cheat codes. It's hard-won knowledge. And I feel like I've done my best to try to figure that out, and then to try to teach younger men and the next generation, and just support men wherever I can, because men need men. If I've learned anything in 30 years of men's work, it's that men need men.
I think that couldn't be more true. I find it very interesting because a couple of different people that I know, they choose selected words: warrior, superhero. You and I've heard you use the term hero's journey. Is there a particular affinity when you select that? Or are you saying each of us as men are heroes, or define that when you say the hero's journey? Because I know we do have the hero's origin. I'm just curious what that means to Craig.
Sure. Well, the hero's journey comes from a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was I guess you'd call him a Jungian. He was really fascinated by the collective unconscious, by archetypes, by, in men's work, in the primary masculine archetypes are the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. And so looking at that sort of matrix and identifying, where am I on that? What type of hero am I? And as for anybody listening out there, you lean in the direction of one of those more than any other. And we can evolve through them. And the idea is not to be, the best, whichever. It's to be really centered and available to all of them. But then that hero, that archetype, goes on a journey. And what Joseph Campbell found was that all of the great myths and legends from all around the world, every single culture, and he studied all the myths. He was a teacher at Sarah Lawrence College in New York. And he found that there was a pattern, that every hero starts in obscurity, and then they meet a mentor, and they get an adventure calls to them, and they usually refuse that adventure. They usually say, oh no, what does Luke Skywalker say? I can't go to Alderaan. I got chores to do, right? There's always a reason we can't go, but then life nudges us forward, and then we cross the threshold. So, they get in the Millennium Falcon, and we're going to light speed, and shoo, right? That's crossing the threshold. We're not in Kansas anymore. Harry Potter goes through the brick wall at the train station, and whoa, now I'm in a magical world. Neo goes in, right now he's seeing the Matrix. So there's this really intense crossing of a threshold. For me, that was my initiation into men's work and ultimately into fatherhood. And then we go on a series of adventures. We have a series of tests and trials with our allies. So Lord of the Rings, right? He's got the 12 dwarves, and what are they? They weren't dwarves. That was Snow White.
The hobbits.
The little guys, right? And yes. and then not Merlin, but Dumbledore, the wizard, right? And so there's the mentor, and there's the allies, and you go on these adventures, and that's what makes a life, is going on these adventures and nearly dying or going bankrupt, or whatever it is, right? We go through these phases, and then we eventually get to the point where we're entering the cave. And one thing that Joseph Campbell said is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. And so that teaches us that to go inward, to go into the place that we are most afraid to go, which particularly for men is, our hearts. That's where we're going to find the thing that we're going out into the world. We're trying to get through, our careers, through sex, through, whatever substances we get involved in, whatever it is that we end up doing, we're looking for something out there, but it's in the last place we would want to go. And so that becomes the ordeal. And so again, it's Neo fighting the agents. It's Luke Skywalker facing Darth Vader. It's, facing the dragon Smog in the Lord of the Rings. And when we face that dragon and we survive it, we end up on the other side. There's a moment of apotheosis, which means technically it means divinization, but it's the highest and best version of ourselves, right? That's how I interpret it. And so it's Neo seeing the Matrix and bending the walls, right?
The awakening, so to speak.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And then there's the reward. And then there's the actual resurrection, which is when you almost die. Like, you think we've cleared the cave, right? We got the reward. Great. We've got the Arkenstone from the dragon, but then you really almost die. And then you survive that. And when you come back full circle, back to the Shire, right? Back to, what is Neo's last thing is he's, I know where you are, right? I know what, and he's in the Matrix, but he's bringing people out of it. That's what he calls mastering both worlds. And the final thing I'll say about this is there's a beautiful interview Bill Moyers did with Joseph Campbell back from, I think it was the 80s. There's a book called The Power of Myth. And I was kind of raised on this. My godfather used to toast every Christmas and Easter dinner with a literal golden goblet. And he would say, follow your bliss. And my folks are executives and, teachers, and I'm sitting here, I'm 12 years old. I'm like, that makes sense. I'll do that. Right. And I didn't know better. Turns out that's a real hard path. And so what Joseph Campbell told Bill Moyers is he said, I think a good life is one hero's journey after another. So we finish the journey and we end up back in this sort of ordinary world again. And some time may go by and it's like, normal, and the Shire is back to normal. But then all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. Oh no, I can't go on another adventure. I already had an adventure. Yeah, well, life doesn't want to hear that. And so we keep going around this cycle. I think that the real answer to your question is we are all heroes. God is living through us. We are the different faces, the 1,000 masks on that hero that lives within us. But the difference is some of us are living lives that we're just asleep, somnambulant sloths, the long gray line of American manhood, from the 50s, where everybody's wearing the same suit, driving the same car with the same white picket fence. And some of us want to wake up and individuate and become the best versions of ourselves in that self-actualization sense in Maslow's hierarchy. But you got to climb that pyramid. And I got a whole thing to talk about with that. But the hero's journey is really about us leaving under the stairs, if we're Harry Potter, realizing that we're in the Matrix, leaving Tatooine where we're just, was it Tatooine, whatever the planet was where Luke lived, and going places that we never imagined going, and having those adventures and really becoming fully self-expressed versions of ourselves. That until we're doing that, until we are the hero of our own journey, we are just a 2-bit character in somebody else's story, and that will never fulfill our soul.
If I may ask, it seems to me that part of the hero's journey and or the reluctance to take it is fear.
Absolutely.
Fear, and I find even with myself and some of my own entrepreneurial adventures and on my career choices, fear has been a thing. We as men, we don't like to talk about fear and what that means. There's this new dynamic, I think, of that. So how does today's man get through that fear? We say push through it and you'll see the other side is golden. But when they encounter that fear, what's the way you would express to them to get through that? How do they deal with the fear of the unknown, of the adventure, of walking into their heroism?
Yeah. I think it's a phenomenal question. I think fear is actually a gift. Fear is so primal. I mean, that's back brain stuff. That's, reptilian brainstem stuff. Fear is designed to keep us alive. But our world has become so small And there's so few things that can actually push us to do things outside of our comfort zone. You could just lay around in your house and order, Uber Eats and be on your computer for the rest of your life, and nothing is going to push you. Right. And so I wouldn't recommend just pushing through fear just because it's there. For me, and the work that I do is, if you push, well, the fMRI brain research tells us that if you push just 4%, not 100%, not some huge flying leap off a cliff, but just 4% beyond your comfort zone in the direction of something that you're innately, you have an innate capacity for, you will hit a flow state. And the
flow
beginning,
state.
oh,
A flow
absolutely.
state.
Yeah. So a flow state
Please
is,
elaborate if you don't mind.
yeah, performing our best, feeling our best. If you're a musician, you know exactly what that is. It's the groove, right? It's like dropping in the pocket. And it's like, oh, this is why I play music with these guys, right? I hit it last night, a conversational flow state. I went out with a bunch of friends and introduced a bunch of them together. We all had a common background. And it was like we hit, one of them, he's like, oh, this is like jazz. It's like conversational jazz. I'm like, yeah, exactly. You can hit it in any number of the, I think Gardner identified 9 types of intelligence. You can hit it cognitively, doing, math problems, Sudoku puzzles, solving, physics equations. You can hit it emotionally. You can hit it, interpersonally. You can hit it musically. You can hit it kinesthetically, right? Playing sports, right? And we love to watch, some of the highest paid people in our society, including actors and athletes and musicians. We love to watch them because they're hitting a flow state, and our prefrontal cortex is full of mirror neurons, and we're like relating to them, and we're like, it makes us feel sympathetic resonance with their flow state. And that's why we love it. And that's why millions of people are willing to pay to see those people on television, wherever. So to be able to hit that flow state, we have to be willing to push 4% beyond our comfort zone.
How do you measure the 4%?
Well, that's fMRI brain research. My point is that it's not a huge flying leap, right? You don't have to do something dangerous to hit it. In fact, I don't recommend that you do, because you could die. I mean, fear is there for a reason. Right. So you think about it, like the thought that came to my mind was, there is a video, and I highly recommend everybody Google this. I don't care whether you like Prince or not. Everybody should Google Prince playing Purple Rain in the rain in 4-inch platform boots at the Super Bowl halftime.
I saw that, dude. That was phenomenal.
Unbelievable. It's
right. It still
unbelievable.
Right. Completely.
Yes.
I still think about that.
It will light up your mirror. If you're not sure what mirror neurons are, you will know by the end of that video. So for Prince, for me, I don't see what would die, but it wouldn't go well. Okay. Like, I don't play that well. Like, I'm not that good. I can't handle that big of a crowd. Right. It just but for Prince, he's played to, 50, 80, 100,000 people before. Has he done it in the rain? Has he done it as a halftime show? No, but that was like 4% beyond his comfort zone at that stage in his career. So we have to work up to it. And the point is, it's like this proximal, the zone of proximal development. It's always just a little further. So, Piaget, if you give a child, right, a child has to carry weight. If your child's not carrying weight, you're raising a brat and you're ruining society. I'm just going to be plain. Your child, right? Like, you have to carry weight.
Yes. If
your child can carry 5 pounds tomorrow, you give them 5 pounds and 1 ounce. That's the zone of proximal development. And we have to be, as men in men's work, we would say leaning into your edge, not flailing and hurling yourself off the cliff, just leaning in the direction of something you're passionate about, a skill that you're crafting, something you're capable of, that you're interested in getting better at. That's optimal. But if I got to get up on stage and I've got to speak to somebody and I've never done that before, I know how to speak. I know how to convey an idea. and getting up on stage. Now, biggest room I've ever been in, right? If you put me in front of a room of 1,000 people, my heart would be racing, but I could do it. And I would rehearse and I would practice, or if you just shoved me out there and you were like, go do it, I'd probably have the adrenaline to just go pull it off. And it would probably actually be like beginner's mind brilliant, but it wouldn't be so far out of my comfort zone that it would be like jumping in front of a bus. It would be zone of proximal development for me. So finding something that meets that criteria for the listeners, right? Find something that is just beyond your comfort zone, that you have an interest in, that you feel would develop your gifts, develop your capacity to serve the world, to do something meaningful, to make a positive impact, and lean in. And that is where you cross the threshold. And now you're in the hero's journey. Now you're feeling more fully alive than you do when you're just living under the stairs, living in a hole in the sand on some desert planet. You're on an adventure. That's what the hero's journey means to me.
I couldn't have asked for a better explanation. I think there's so many gems that were in there. My follow-up to that would be, do we have a definitive picture of what a man is today? In particular, in talking to some of the people that we're specializing in, men over 40, if I were going to say, who is man today? What would your response be?
There's a lot of beliefs going around about what masculinity is and what a man is. And I was a philosophy major. So I always try to cut to the core. What is the definition of a man? How do you define a man?
Let's delve into that deeply.
Yeah. And so I don't know, man, is it cool if I Google it real quick? Can I just,
yes.
I don't want to make assumptions because then I just look.
No, I appreciate that. Let's do it, Kat.
So define man. All right. An adult male human being. Okay. A human being of either sex, a person, right? So like, all mankind, humanity, something of that. Right. Let's see. The express surprise. Yeah, I'm not sure if this gives us exactly what we're looking for here. So I would then look at one thing that I tend to look at. Where did you go here? I lost you. One thing that I tend to look at is, I know you're in here somewhere. There you are. One thing that I tend to look at when it comes to masculinity is what have our ancestors done right for the past couple 100,000 years, such that we're sitting here today having this conversation. Because if they got it so wrong, that was the end of that experiment, right? That experiment fizzled out, but the experiment that worked is the one that brought us here today. So what were they doing that worked? They were inseminating females. That is undeniable. That is how we are ultimately arriving here today. Okay. Now the masculine, the male body is stronger physically by and large, right? I mean, there's always exceptions, there's always a bell curve, but if we look at the majority, the masculine body is stronger. It can lift more, it can hit harder. And, there's some women that I'm sure could mess me up and I'm afraid of them. They've trained, they're built differently, like granted. And the masculine body is designed to provide and protect. That's what it's designed for. The female body is designed to give birth, to nourish, to nurture, right? And the masculine psyche prefers stillness. The feminine psyche prefers movement. It's radiant, right? So the masculine is the void. I mean, this is my philosophy and religious degree, background. I studied all religion.
I'm digging it.
Yeah. I studied global religions, and they all have this thing in common, that that there is sort of a radiant. This is more Eastern philosophy, mysticism, Buddhism, things like that, Zen. But there's a radiant void which is just pure consciousness. And then there is a light within that. And it's the interplay of the thing and the no thing, the form and the formless, and that dance back and forth. And so in our world, everything is form, and every man has a feminine and a masculine nature. Every woman has a masculine and a feminine nature. There's a yin yang going on all the time inside of us, between us. And so the definition of a man today, the other thing is, females have menarche. They reach a certain point where they become viable as procreators. For men, it's not so clear. And so we've traditionally had masculine rites of passage, initiation, where it's anything from, the men rushing into the village in the middle of the night with masks on, and it's this horrific thing, and the mother, don't take my baby, and they rip him out of her hands, and she's sobbing, and it's this big traumatic thing, even though the women know this is what happens every year for a certain, number of boys, and they get taken out to the woods, and they get their faces tattooed with a leaf and a stick, and they get circumcised, or they get whatever. You walk that direction for 7 days, and if you can survive, when you return, you're a man. That's a little bit intense for today's society. Helicopter parents and everybody, right? But you hear stories.
Intense was the word.
Richard Branson's mother got fed up with him. She packed a sandwich and a map and threw his bicycle in the trunk, and she drove him about a couple hours north of where they lived. And she said, "Get out." And the next day he walked in the front door, didn't say anything, just walked up to his room, and he was different. He was different. And so masculine rites of passage are a very important part. It's in our DNA. This is just something that we do. And so, there are men who are biologically viable to reproduce, but are they psychologically equipped?
That's the part.
I'm not so sure. And where does that come from? Well, that comes from other men. And so, it's funny, man, because I'm Gen X. I think you must be as well. Yeah.
I'm Gen X also.
Yeah. Yeah. So we still got rough up. Right.
Not to interrupt, men, I've had incredible men mentors. I really feel blessed, along with my dad, his good friend. And then even in my professional career, I've had incredible male mentors that have been instrumental in that. And, they were the old school, so to speak. And I tend to be more an artist, creative kind of person. And so I had the old school men teaching, as far as they didn't have the code words that we have now. They just said, "This is me." And that's how I learned to do that. And then enveloped it into the type of man I was. And they nurtured that. Yeah. And so it helped in my professional life and so forth. So I've been the toxic masculinity and these things today, and where masculinity fits into, is it always interconnected with being a man? I think is a question that some people don't know, but I understand it from the mentors I've had, that the two are interconnected in whatever way it's radiated from each individual male himself. And that's
how do you mean being a man and masculine? Like how do you see that?
It's a great question. I really feel that, first I'll give the example. My dad, he did every single sport and excelled at it. And he was from the old generation, 1916, where I walked 12 miles to work to school and 12 miles home. Mm-hmm. He did boxing, football, and all that. But he loved Bambi.
Uh-huh.
He, with my brothers and I, he had us sit and watch the movie Bambi. And when my dad told me when he first saw Bambi, and he shed a tear. But here's my dad that did football, an all-star champion, military police, World War II, etc. And then Big Nate, who was a mentor of mine, this big dude, 6'6", owned a bar. And every morning during the winter time when it snowed, he'd always have to have a moment just for him to weep. But it wasn't, everyone knew Big Nate to be, ooh, but he would let me know that. And we'd go outside and shovel the snow because I'm from the East Coast, upstate New York,
Yeah.
in Albany.
Yeah.
And so masculinity and vulnerability and tenderness and or warmth, to me, masculinity fits in with understanding in my role as this man, there is a feeling I have of courageousness in the face of fear, vulnerable when when it's a safe place, because I think safe place is kind of a specific word, and that when the job comes and I have to get the job done, I'm going to get it done. And then masculinity doesn't have a one way of it showing itself in my idea. It's a spectrum, but the focus tends to be strength is not just the appearance of it, but it's the inward that radiates outward of here's this man, the same way that we understand here's this woman. So if I'm going to look at a physical description of some of the masculinity, it's in some of the old school traditions, holding a door open for a woman. I think that's a masculine thing to do. And again, this is not an offense to any persons who identify as they choose to any of that. Just my perspective in the sense that I saw these men exude masculinity where it wasn't necessarily definitive by words, but it was in your actions. So masculinity to me, in whatever those forms are to the newer generation, to me, it is in your behavior. It encompasses warmth, strength, courageousness in the face of fire, tenacity, persistence. And I think the other thing I really would like to highlight for brothers who are out there, it is also that when you feel a challenge come upon you and you're not really sure where to go, there's a brotherhood in masculinity that I can talk to my brothers and they will kick my butt or they'll put their arms around me. And so all of those are how I understood masculinity to show itself in the full man of what that is. And I think the word masculinity has been kind of too flexible in some ways and or demonized, but I don't know that it has to be.
I think we need to reclaim it. I don't even know if that's right. Or I just think we need to reclaim healthy expression in a male body. Call it masculine. I don't really give a what you call it, but I think that just being decent individuals who happen to be in a male body, whatever that looks like, we can call that masculinity. But yeah, it's chivalry. It's just being a gentleman. I think it's being a protector. You know, one of the things that's interesting about me too, and this is probably a wasp's nest, but I've spoken with a lot of women about this, and a lot of women that I talk to over the past 10 years, maybe longer, they're wondering, where are the men?
Yes. And this is what I want to get into. So I'm glad we're here. I was looking for this segue. So please elaborate.
Yeah. Well, and so if you think about a guy, you know, a perpetrator, I just finished the morning show with Steve Carell and Jennifer Aniston. Wonderful. It was well done.
Great show. Yeah. Dig it.
Yeah. Really good show. And so, you know, they're going back and I was like, man, I haven't really thought about this in a while, but if you think about it, where does a man who can be that kind of a perpetrator and a predator, where does he come from? He comes from a world where, and you think about this again, going back to the evolutionary biology, what did we do for hundreds of thousands of years? And when did that change? It changed maybe around 300 years ago, around the Industrial Revolution, where fathers left the farms to work in the factories. And now the boys are not tagging around with dad all day out in the yard, you know, on the farm, right? Banging on horseshoes and, you know, lifting heavy stuff and being given heavy stuff to carry around, toddling behind their father, right? And learning the ways of the male body and grounded in the male body. They're being raised by women, and women don't really have a lot of tolerance for young male energy, which is very boisterous and energetic. And what I've seen in women I've dated, in mothers I've known, I'll tell every single mother the same thing. Right around 10, 12 years old, I'll say, when he starts pushing you harder than you are willing to tolerate, don't get the scissors out. Hand him off to the men and let them do their job. And they'll say to me, what men? And so the fact that they're are several generations now of boys that were raised by women, that were taught by women in schools, and the women would shut down that young, very natural, very healthy, masculine impulse in these boys, particularly as they're coming of age and the testosterone starts flowing. They get a skewed self-perception of their worth. They get shamed, they get castrated, they get put into a box. And you get enough men that get raised this way for enough generations where fathers leave, they don't want to tolerate this. And you end up with a generation of men who don't know how to behave, and they end up treating women out of anger and frustration for, as a backlash of how they were treated as boys, and men who don't know how to stand up to those men and protect the women from bad actors like Harvey Weinstein. You get both of those. And there are tons of great men, like really solid, good men in this.
I agree. I know them.
Tons.
I know great men. Yes.
Tons. Who would step in, who would do hard things, say hard things. But it's difficult, and it's not common. And it takes a lot of courage. And it's back to that zone of proximal development. If I've never seen anybody stand up to another man, if I haven't seen how to tell a man, that's not cool, I'm not okay with you speaking to her that way, where does that come from? Where do I learn that? And so there's an author I really like. His name is Stephen Jenkinson. And he's written 2 books I'm aware of. One is called Die Wise, which is brilliant for anybody dealing with end-of-life stuff with parents, fathers. There's another one called Coming of Age, which is about getting older. And one thing he says is that because we've had so many generations without ritual masculine initiation, we don't have, and we're all raised in, grade levels, right? Where there's a teacher and then a whole grade level versus what we would normally have, which is, an old white hair, a gray hair, a bunch of men, a bunch of younger men, a bunch of journeymen, a bunch of boys, a bunch of toddlers. And we're all kind of in this hierarchy together, figuring out, and raising each other up at different levels. We have to, the term I really like is reweaving our ruptured masculine lineage. What Stephen Jenkinson says is we have to make elders of our olders, because they will just go off the cliff and take their wisdom with them because they think nobody wants to hear it, because we don't have that kind of culture anymore. So whenever I've got an opportunity, I will befriend an older man and just ask him questions. What's that like for you? Right? Yeah. That type of thing. Yeah. We have to do that. We have to reach down to the younger men. We have to reach up to the older men. And then we've got to get them connected. And that's how we reweave this. And I think that's where the information that's missing, that transmission through the generations, I think it's still in us. But I think we have to reconnect enough of us together in a certain way that it starts flowing. And all the men's groups I've joined, after about 2 years, it just becomes patently obvious how to be a good man. It's just nobody has any questions about that anymore. So that's a fascinating social experiment. And I would highly recommend anybody who's listening to this, if you're experiencing isolation, if you're feeling like, wow, the guys I'm hanging around aren't really going deep, go online, go to mkp.org, for mankindproject.org, go to everyman.org, EVRYMAN. or maybe it's .com, whatever. Find a men's organization where you can go be around the types of men. I think there's a whole bunch of new ones now. Sacred Sons. I've got friends from doing men's work with John Wineland, who they've started a bunch of programs. So there's tons of it out there now. Like you can fall off a log and bump into some men's group trainings and circles and things like that. Go find it. It's in your DNA. You will feel much happier, more fulfilled, more solid, and clearer in what it means to be a man in today's day and age. And you don't need a textbook for that, and you don't need video training. It will just come back to the surface, and it'll come back alive if you get into a conscious group of men who are working at becoming better, and something natural, like an upward vortex, just naturally starts to form there. And it's brilliant. It's an incredible experience.
I agree with you. And you said a couple of things I wanted to touch on. When I was growing up, we had barbershops. And in our community, young black men, you would go to the barbershop, your dad would take you or your grandpa, whomever was your male parental figure. And
Mhm.
you go into the barbershop, and that was somewhat like a bar mitzvah. It was a rite of passage into manhood. So you would go into I remember when my dad, I used to get my hair cut with my parents and so forth. And my dad brought my brother and myself and my cousin into the barbershop. And I didn't know this until years later, how much it meant and what it was like in
Mhm.
the mentorship of manhood. So about 13, he brought us into the barbershop and he said, "You fellas take care of them." He transferred his care into these other men.
Mhm.
And I was so used to my dad being like, "Okay, I got you, son, I got you, son." But he was trying to build a community of male support for me. And that's how traditionally, if you had a dad, and in these times, you would go to the barbershop, and those men in there were a part of the elders.
Yes.
They were the older cats that gave you the wisdom about, you remember, young man, when you work hard and you put your money away this way. Or if a woman says this, and you had conversations, also jokes and so forth, but you were with the elders.
Yeah.
So we went into that barbershop, and when my dad would take us there, from every time I went to that barbershop, it was filled with men conversation, and it wasn't derogatory or anything. It was a treasure trove of male influence and
Mhm.
support to help you feel like we are here for you. And I even go back, or so later, I get older, and Promise Keepers. I'm not sure if you remember Promise Keepers.
I do.
I went to one of the meetings, and I know they have somewhat a good and bad reputation to their name, but I went to one of the meetings, and one of the biggest valuable lessons I had was also, again, male community, male community,
Yeah.
and that was what had been missing. So I went to the group, and they said the best thing a man can do to show what a good man is to keep his commitments to other men. And
Mhm.
that had stuck with me so much, how valuable that was to me in my lessons. And that's how I tried to raise the young men I was responsible for in the youth groups I worked with, my
Yeah.
godsons and my son. And I found that what you touched on was reconnecting with those other positive men that can give you the support. And that's what we need to do. And what I've tried to do is connect the younger men to the older generation.
Mhm.
I find it very fascinating that you chose men over 40. What was that for? As opposed to, because you did 30 years of work.
Yeah.
So in some of your map focusing, it was men over 40. Why
Mhm.
that particular age? Was there something behind that? Because as we spoke, we're somewhat talking about the younger generation, how they need to have
Yeah.
some of the experiences we've had.
Yeah.
Why that particular age?
There's a couple of reasons. One is when I was, being adopted, my folks were 30. So by the time I got to high school, around 15, all of my friends, all my parents' friends were going through their midlife transitions. And so these were very successful business people in Chicago and a lot of academics. And so I got the sort of the hero's journey version of the midlife transition, the passage from, I've been grinding for 20 years to get to this point, and now I'm at the top of Success Mountain, and I don't have to do anything. I've worked, I've made my money. What do I do when I don't have to do anything? And to me, there is no education about this. Nobody talks about it. We end up empty nesting. That was hard, right? I went through that with my daughter. Health stuff starts to kick in. Our parents' mortality starts to kick in. We start looking around and saying, I've got so much potential. I've got so much energy still. I'm in my prime. What do I do with this? I don't want to just stay on the golden hamster wheel. I don't want to keep grinding. I want to do something deeper, more meaningful. I want to experience fulfillment. I want to self-actualize. And I think the way that I got there was, I used to just work with any man. I used to work with women as well. I stopped doing that about 5-6 years ago, and
Mm,
just, I would work with any man. And, and the most successful men that would come work with me, they started self-actualizing right in front of me, like through our
mm,
work together. And that just fascinated me because it's rare. And they really appreciated it. And I realized, there's tons of success coaches out there. I don't need to be another success coach. I mean, will this help you be more successful? Yeah, absolutely. What I do it will streamline your path. It'll tell you, go into your fear in this direction because this is what you're wired for. But successful midlife men, there's nothing really available for them. They get super marginalized. Like, oh, you poor old rich man, like, right? But they have hearts and they have feelings and they're depressed.
And you're tagging into something. Yes, absolutely, bro.
Right? And their therapist is never made more than $80,000 a year. And this guy comes in with a $10 million exit and he's like, I think I might be depressed. And these guys tell me, my therapist literally laughed out loud when I said I thought I might be depressed. What happens is, think about dopamine. Dopamine is the reward molecule, but it's more than that. It's a motivation molecule. You think about, right? We're 98.5% chimpanzee or 97.5% chimpanzee, right? You think about a monkey reaching for a banana. That's an evolutionary drive. He's got to get that banana or he's not going to survive. So the brain gives you a little boost of dopamine to go, I'm going to get it. Yeah, I got it. But then you imagine a monkey surrounded by bananas. He doesn't have any dopamine. He's got no reason to reach for anything. He got his 10 million bananas. He doesn't need anything else. So he needs a new mission. His hero's journey has to start over again. So now his ordinary world is in the land of 10 million bananas. Now what? Well, you see that pomegranate way over there? Oh.
So you help to show them that pomegranate.
I help them see, but here's what's most interesting. So Maslow wrote about, right? So survival, safety. He never made a pyramid, by the way. I have to make this disclaimer. Maslow never made a pyramid.
I learned that at school too, right? As a psych major.
Right, totally. Maslow thought about the levels, the hierarchy of needs more like spinning plates, right? You get the survival plate spinning. Okay, then you get the safety plate spinning. It's emotional safety. It's like secure attachment, but it's also, bombs aren't going off, things like that. Social belonging, right? Oh, you got to keep that survival. Got to eat lunch, right? Yeah, got to make sure everything's secure. Okay, great. Now we got our friends and we're having a good time, right? Now I can start to get into what he calls ego achievement level. I call it the success level. Ego achievement, our ego is not the enemy. It's only when it's driving the bus that it's the enemy, but we need our ego. That's the avatar in the video game. And so survival, safety, social belonging, success, self-actualization. Maslow was journaling about something beyond this that he called self-transcendence. This is an experience that I started having. So I knew that my midlife, a friend of mine calls it the midlife chrysalis. I knew that was coming, right? It happens around a certain age. There's a transition that happened with my daughter graduating. There was a transition that happened with me moving out west. So I just gave myself tons of space, and COVID happened right in the middle of this. About 9 months after I left New York, I actually raised my daughter in Rochester. So you said Albany. I was like,
oh, I know Rochester.
Right. Yeah. So I left and I was just driving around and I had the roads to myself for like about a better part of a year and a half. It was wonderful. And I just let myself totally just let go of everything, my whole identity. And this was my thing, right? I was a philosophy major, so I knew how to do this. I've studied enough Jungian psychology and philosophy and mysticism to know that this was happening to me and to go into it consciously. And then one day, my truck got stolen with like 10,000 hours worth of gear in it. And I said, okay, what's next? Right. It was a crossing the threshold into the next thing. I made money on the insurance. Like I lost some stuff. I lost baby pictures and, the journal that my mother kept, my first year of life. And it's a little sad, but what are you going to do? And so I moved into that. And about 3 weeks later, GPT came out. I had researcher access to open.ai or openai.com, whatever. And I got GPT and I said, okay, this is the next thing. And I bought purpose.ai and we're developing that now. I just knew that wave was going to roll in. I bought it about 8 years ago. And so all of a sudden GPT, I'm like, okay, here we go. Next thing you know, I went from just a solo coaching business to I got 12 people around the world. We're scaling. This thing's growing. And I said, well, we've got to focus. Who do I want to focus on? And I said,
okay, this is
where it happens. Successful midlife men don't have anybody to talk to about what they're going through. And because I had witnessed this from the time I was a teenager, so So I'm 48 and a half now. So for over 30 years, I've been watching men, right? I was initiated into Mankind Project when I was 18. So I have just witnessed men going through their midlife passage for decades. And I've got the psychological training. I've got I'm not a doctor, right? But I've got the philosophical training and I've got the neuroscience training. I just understand that from my own biohacking for decades and studying all this stuff. I'm an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. I understand what they're going through, and we can talk about it, and I can guide them through, right? Because every hero on their journey has a guide. You have to have a guide. You've got to have your Morpheus. You've got to have your Dumbledore. You've got to have Obi-Wan Kenobi, somebody to guide you through. That's the only way you get through. Otherwise, you get stuck somewhere in the midst of it and you don't know what's going on. So we decided that that's what we were going to do, and it blew up. And it's been a blast. I have the best time. But here's the most important part, Seth. When I look out at the world and how chaotic it is, how, I don't want to say fucked up, but how crazy it is.
I dig it.
When I think about who's going to make the change, who is most equipped to make the biggest positive impact, it's the successful midlife men who've got the track record, the time, because they don't have to work right now, the resources, they've got the networks, they've got the vision, they know what to do. And the only thing they're missing is, what am I going to focus on? Point me in the right direction. They literally come to me and say, I could literally do anything. Point me in the right direction. And I just worked with a man today. This guy's, I don't know what he's got. He's probably got close to $100 million. Mm-hmm. He could do anything. And we got him crystal clear on what he's going to do. And it's not about making more money. It's about fulfilling his soul. The self-transcendence level is about, my life is no longer my own. I'm here as a vessel of the divine. How can I serve today? And when that's flowing through me, those flow neurochemicals, the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin flowing through me, I'm good. I'm chilling, man. This is what life's about. But until you've hit, this is actually I got a video on YouTube that we're just releasing on Thursday of this week. Until you've hit your freedom number, you can want to do great things in the world, but you don't have the resources. You don't have the time. Can you hit a Hail Mary? Absolutely. But you know what? For most men, just climb the ladder, figure out the thing that you can be amazing at, go like hell, hit your success number, hit the number where you can actually retire. That typically happens for men somewhere mid 40s to late 50s is about the range. Okay. If you do things right, if you've got your wits about you, if you're focused on the right things, if you're in the right game, got good mentors, and you've got integrity as a man, which I love you were talking about that in the barbershop. That's where you learn it. If you got that kind of integrity and that focus and discipline, you will become successful. Then you get to the starting line of the real game. And that's what I help you do. And that just fascinates me. So that's why I work with successful midlife men.
I'm very curious. You mentioned that, especially with the transcendentalism and this, self-actualization and all of those. So a part of what I've learned is that spirituality does play a role in this. Mm-hmm. How do you see that with today's man and going this direction? Is it that they come into an epiphanous moment and because I also love when you said this, I didn't want to miss this, when you go into it consciously. Mm-hmm. So that means there's some spirituality that's happening. There's some spiritual growth that's happening. Where does that spirituality fit into? Or connect those pieces for the audience. Spirituality plays what of an important role in a man's growth at this age and when they're looking at that? Or does it? Is it something that an atheist and a Christian and a Muslim and a Jew walk into a bar? Or, is it, how does that play a role?
You're going to finish that joke for us?
I would, but my pops would roll over in his grave.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Look, man, spiritual intelligence is one of Howard Gardner's 9 types of intelligence. So you can get musical intelligence like Prince, like Michael Jackson, right? You can get kinesthetic intelligence, like pick your favorite athlete, right? You can get cognitive intelligence. You can get relational intelligence, the interpersonal, right? There are a number of intelligences. Spiritual is one of them. Now, we all have what's called a psychograph, right? Where, if you plot all of those and like, how are you doing? School measures like 2 of them, but all 9 are valuable. And a lot of the men I work with were C students, but they go out and make, so much money, it'll make your head spin. Why is that? Because they've got a different type of intelligence than what school was testing for. And that's where mentoring is really important. You've got to find people who have done what you want to do and who are exhibiting the type of man that you want to become. And so spirituality to me is, well, what do they say in like 12-step programs? It's like the wet part of the ocean, right? It's like, it's everywhere.
I hadn't heard that one before. That's great.
It's everywhere. Like, what are you going to do? Like to me, but I'm a mystic at heart. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I pulled away from it. Right. But it's like, when my degree is in, Rumi and Buddhism and Zen and the Old Testament and the New Testament. I mean, I studied all of it. And so there are words that you can find if you look that will point at an experience in your heart. I don't care where you look, every religion, every form, because Buddhism would not consider itself a religion, every form of philosophical thought points at something transcendent within mankind. And it's your choice how you want to relate with that. For me, I like the Rumi line, God is nearer to you than your next breath. Well, how do you understand that? That's damn near a koan, right? But I'll tell you, man, I went full carnivore this quarter. Right? I'm one of the men's groups that I run is called the Wolf Pack. And every quarter we pick a high, hard goal and we fucking stretch for it. And every day we're taking actions and habits towards it. And if we slip, right, we do a get real session and it keeps you on track. And there's a breakthrough that happens where your identity can't sustain the focused discipline and you break down, but then you get back up and all of a sudden you become the man that you wanted to be. It's a profound experience. Going full carnivore means all I'm eating is meat. And I was vegan for 6 years, like 20 years ago. So I've done the whole spectrum, right? Yeah. Right. For me, my type O negative blood type, that's the oldest blood type, right? I'm better with protein and avoiding grains. So I'm eating eggs, fish, meat, chicken, and ghee, which is clarified butter. And then I'm taking sodium, magnesium, and potassium just to make sure my electrolytes. So otherwise you can get leg cramps with it. Drinking plenty of water. That's all I'm eating. Tell you what, my shopping trips are so fast. Cooking is just like a stewed chicken in the Instant Pot, right? It's just quick. But the biggest thing I'm noticing is my nervous system is settling because my mind's not like, what am I going to eat? And oh, I'm craving this. And, I got some preservatives in my brain, or I got some kind of, herbs or spices in there that are rattling around. My nervous system is so sensitive that, I can't focus when I've got that stuff. So I've been hacking my diet for decades. When I just went straight carnivore, something deepened in me. One thing I realized is coffee's not carnivore. So I've been off coffee. So I'm laying on the couch, kind of recovering from some burnout. And I'm like, after a couple of weeks of this, I'm realizing, number one, I've got energy for the things that really matter. Like this podcast, I wasn't, I laid down and rested before this podcast, but I got tons of energy for this. This is fun for me. I enjoy this. This is great. The other stuff, I'm like, I got to do that. I'm like, I would need coffee to do that. I'm not going to motivate. And I'm like, you know what? I've got a team. I've delegated it to them. Let them handle it. And I come back inside and there's like a spiritual, it almost feels like a planet. It's like this bedrock. It's this ground inside me. I've never experienced that before. Very different than the big epiphanies I've had over the decades. Very different. Those are hard. They're not sustainable. People get a little, psychotic, like I am God. And it's like, okay, all right, take a breath. Let's talk tomorrow. Right. It's like, you get those guys, right?
Yes, I
Happy
know,
for you,
Filek.
brother. Like, welcome to the club, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Craig,
Let's
right.
talk tomorrow and let's figure out
We
how we're going
got
to
you.
integrate this, because you got a lot of neurology that's going to have to unwind before you can sustain any semblance of that kind of self-actualized awareness. But for me, I'm starting to come to this place where it's like, oh, I can just rest into some kind of ground. I call it a spiritual experience. I wasn't aware of this or had access to this up until about a week and a half ago. You know, I've had flickers of it, little insights, little glimpses, but to live like this and to live in this deep trust that things are going to work out. And my guy calls me and all of a sudden we get into a 4-hour workshop on Saturday and we built the next website. And it's like, where did that come from? You know, trusting and resting, and my life is no longer my own, and my ego is not driving the bus, and I don't have to get anything. Now, that's a stage of life. I'm not saying that everybody's there. What I am saying, though, is that there is something spiritual about each human, and how you relate to it is up to you. I encourage you to consider what relationship that spiritual reality wants with you. Because to the degree
it wants with you,
yeah, because to the degree that it's real, it's more intelligent than me, my ego, right? I mean, it's part of me.
Oh
So
my gosh, you just clicked off something. Oh wow, Craig. Oh, dig it. I just had an awakening moment when you just said that. Please continue. Dig it.
I want to hear your moment.
At that moment, even when I asked you, is it what the man wants with the spirituality or what the spirituality wants? And as soon as you said that, that is you being open as the vessel to see the guidance because you're ready now.
Fuck,
because
do I
you're
know?
ready now.
What the fuck do I know? Is the height of wisdom. I mean, that's Socrates. All I know is I know nothing. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, and you get guys like Huberman, right? Who is a neuroscientist. He's a brain scientist. He's actually like an ocular scientist, but the eyes are just part of the brain that got squeezed out to, be receptors. And there's a video of him from, he went through a little Me Too-ish type stuff last year. And, I don't follow him too closely, but I'm here in the Bay Area. And so he's sort of in the zeitgeist. I know people that went to high school with him talking about him, stuff like this. And I remember seeing a video shortly thereafter where he was talking about, this guy's the ultimate biohacker. Here's 3-hour podcast on all the research on sleep, 3-hour podcast on all the research on coffee, on all the research on cold water exposure, on all, whatever it is, exercise. And this is video of him saying, of all of my morning routine hacking that I've done over the years and decades, none of it has touched me deeper than some version. I'm going to get this wrong, but you can find the video. Some version of, please, higher power, remove from me my character defects and flaws today. And that opens something up in our physical body. It's like, I can't do it. It's like trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. My ego can't elevate itself. My ego can get to the point where it's confident enough that it's not going anywhere. It's not going to get wiped out and destroyed by the spiritual higher power, whatever that is to you. We need it. God needs us to have an ego. Like, it needs us to have a body to work through us in the world, through our hands, through our speech. And our ego is a part of that, our personality. I just don't want it driving the bus anymore. And so can I rest and just let that settle and let the deeper reality come through and get curious about, well, what would you have me do? What do you want me to say today? Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to work on or not? And just rest. And if I get curious about that, and I'm no spiritual teacher, I have no interest in being anything of the sort, but I've studied this a lot over decades. There's something there, and it's bigger than me. And it probably has a better idea of what might be a good use of my time and talent today than I do. And I can go off and play and have my delusional fantasies and build whatever I want. And it's going to be there waiting for me when I get back. But that's how I relate with it. And I'm just coming into more of a relationship with it just in the past couple of weeks, just because I changed my diet, and it's shifting my nervous system state to such a degree that I can actually feel it present within me, which was shocking to me. That's not why I did full carnivore. I just wanted to clean out my system from all the sugar I ate over Christmas. It's like, that's a good idea. It was super pragmatic. It's kind of a shock that it's happening. So I'm sharing it in a lot of kind of awe and wonder. I'm not necessarily recommending to, talk to your doctor. I don't know if this is right for you. I'm just saying that there is a spiritual experience available without substances that I'm enjoying. Highly recommend it.
I'm overwhelmed with questions, and I want to be respectful of your time, because I definitely, there's so much more I'd like to be able to do with you as far as a conversation on this portion of men and seeking that out and being open as a vessel for that spiritual growth, because that definitely was a real moment of pause for me. So tell our audience about the name and where it came up with of your organization.
Purpose mapping?
Yes.
Yeah, I got a cease and desist letter for the original name. Core Clarity. I was like, Core Clarity is a great name. And somebody else was like, yeah, freaking stop using it.
I was getting all serious. I was like, okay, let's see that.
Yeah. So I got purpose mapping, and I trademarked the damn thing. And it's you gotta call it something. And it really seemed to, because look, man,
I expected something a little different or profound. I was looking for profanity, and this is still a place, cease and desist, and this name it something.
You got to call it something. And so, I'm fundamentally, I used to, my email signature used to say soul cartographer. I don't know, purpose mapping. It stuck. People said, I love that. And so I went with it.
Too.
Yeah,
I do too. I am very much a word, a lover. I feel that it used to be that words and how we took our time to examine what we'd say and pause, which was also a part of our growth, I believe, and maturity, that when we would speak to someone, we knew that our words were meaning something very deep, and we wanted them to be specific enough to convey messages. I don't know that nowadays words are too much triggers as opposed to conversational pieces of us growing. Mm-hmm. And so focus mapping was something that does stick with me, because it has these other thoughts that you can have focus mapping, and in particular when it relates to men at those ages. Mm-hmm. And I think once you hit 40 and you've made certain accomplishments, you've reached certain goals and so forth, and then you come to this other point where you're thinking, okay, I've accomplished these things, and you mentioned it earlier, what's next? And so focus mapping ties into a lot of my interest in how those words clearly define and mapping your focus and what is the next step, and then you tie that into asking spirit, where do I go from here? What do you want from me as a portion of my next phase in this life? So those type of words stick with me, and how they sometimes, I think I could have capsulized it by saying this. My dad used to always say, and I'll quote my dad quite often, because some of the wisdom and pieces of gems that he's given me have stuck with me with my life. And he said, in naming your child, you name them a name that has a meaning, because it also provides a doorway into the destiny. And that's the same way we choose our words in conversations. When you choose words to speak to other people, you want to speak warmth, openness, and direction. You choose your words selectively, because sometimes you're also still leaving breadcrumbs for others from the lessons you've learned, and they can feed upon. And so words and focus mapping, those are some of my ties, and I can be very literal with that, but I appreciate how they mean, and I don't undervalue them.
Yeah.
Craig, with respect to your time, my good man, I would love us to continue this conversation. And I don't know what your time looks like, but I have just been enjoying this, and I've found even more lessons than I thought. And we knew this would be a great conversation. I don't know if you have time to continue for a few more minutes. I want to
I
be
got
respectful.
I got about 6 more minutes, and then you'll appreciate this. I'm mentoring a young man who is going to take purpose mapping to the 15-year-old son of one of my successful midlife men clients.
Oh, dig it.
He's got a 15-year-old, and I said, I've got a protege. He's 20. I took him through it when he was 18. Would you like him to take your son through it? So I'm building a bridge there and trying to get this work to the younger generation, because I really think that's where it's most needed. So
I'd like us to talk more about that too, because I continue to work with young people, and I think this is something. Well, I've said in my last few interviews, I've had such great guests that we have these valuable resources, and I continue to work toward where can we also utilize with some time allotted aside from our schedules to create a synergistic occurrence of things to be further encouraging to young people and these lessons. So I'd like us to continue the discussion at some point and have you back on, and even behind the scenes where you and I can discuss that. But in these next few minutes, Craig, let everyone know what you feel is the most important part, elements of your organization, and where they can reach you, and the message you feel is the exclamation point to our discussion today.
Sure. Well, I put together some resources at purposemapping.com/makersbar.
Fantastic.
And yeah, you guys can go there, and I'll have some stuff for you. My team's gathering it up right now, so I'm not sure exactly what you're going to get there, but some version of the work that we do. We try to make this accessible to everybody. Part of the reason that we're working with successful midlife men is because they can afford to pay for, my time is at a premium. And so,
for sure,
right, and I'm using those funds to create purpose.ai so that we can reach 100 million men. So I think the most important thing is to understand that ultimately we've got AI, robots, universal basic income. There are a billion jobs that are going to just disappear that are not coming back, like the coal miners. It's just what are they going to do? And if we don't reskill humanity, and so a lot of
Toffler, that's Toffler,
right? And
Alvin
right,
Toffler,
exactly, right. Future shock. And so the experience that successful midlife men have, where they reach the point where, like, I don't have to work. What do I do if I don't have to do anything? That's going to get universalized. That's going to get democratized with universal basic income or whatever we do to replace what people are doing, because robots and AI are going to take over so many jobs so fast. People aren't going to have anything to do. And so we're trying to use that technology to be able to say, you can do the next thing that humanity needs done. And let's figure out what your unique contribution is to that. Let's get you into a men's group. Let's get you guys working together. I kind of see it like Purpose Olympics, that there's just local, regional, national, global levels of men's groups coming together to, we used to get together to hunt the mammoth. Right now, let's get together and take down global problems or local problems, national problems, right? We can get the brightest minds together, and that's where we're ultimately going. So if you'd like to be a part of that, you can go to purposemapping.com/makersbar. And, that's why I said yes to this podcast, because you guys want to raise up 1 million leaders. It's like, how can I contribute to that? So we're ultimately building something. It's not there yet. It's actually a pretty interesting technical challenge, but I've surrounded myself with everybody's in their zone of genius. We're all going like hell. We're making magic together, and in short order, we will have something available. And I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, purposemapping.com/makersbar, and look forward to hearing from you guys.
Absolutely. And Craig, when this is published and released, we will continue to promote your efforts, and we want to be a part of that, because this is our mission, is creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. And how do we do that except for the help and assistance of professionals like yourself who are creating these pathways and opening up doors? So we'd like to continue to build a relationship with you as well in doing so. And me personally, as a man who feels brotherhood is extremely important, and that I do feel your and my discussion today, and some of the incredible men I've been meeting of late, we have a different vocation these days, and we seem to be getting a clearer picture of what our role is going to play in discovering how we can contribute in this next phase.
Yeah.
Craig, I thank you so much, my good friend. I would like to call you a good friend and a good brother already, because this has been a blessing to me in so many ways. And I'm sure it's going to be a blessing for a number of the men who are watching this,
Absolutely.
young men and old. So I thank you completely for sharing your time with Maker's Bar and our audience. It means a great deal to us. And I don't just say that because we're here and I'm looking forward to staying in contact afterward. I really mean this was a definite pause moment in a couple of different ways of an interview for me. I truly treasured this time and what you shared.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for the invitation.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Well, today we are talking about men and manhood. And sometimes the conversation on being a man in today's world can be very taboo and or if not a touchy subject. With men like Craig, this is the type of bridge we're wanting to build in communication and discovering where we're going to go from here. So, Maker's Bar audience, you, our male participants and audience listeners, please take time out to check out Craig's site and what his work is doing. Refer different brothers, younger men who you mentor, to his site and resources. I've checked it out. It's a phenomenal story. And organization, but his story is also one that can be used as an example and a template. We truly treasure your time that you've taken out to watch this broadcast, and we look forward to seeing you on the next time. This is your guy, Seth Guru Baxter. And remember, the love evolution begins with you. It is a revolution of love. We are the change for today, for tomorrow. We look forward to seeing you next time. Everyone, take good care of yourselves. Craig, thank you so much, my brother. We're looking forward to seeing you again. Good peace and good love to you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.